What's up, guys? Paulie Malignaggi for Paulie TV. Very confused, Paulie Malignaggi. I'll tell you that, man. This is something real weird, bro. I'll tell you. Gervonta Davis versus Jake Paul. Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis, however you want to call it. Didn't really see this one coming. I know a lot of people were talking about it. There was the rumor mill. I don't know if you guys at home had heard the rumor mill. This had been being talked about even prior to the Lamont Roach fight. I thought it was so utterly ridiculous, especially that you've essentially manufactured Gervonta into a star without really having him fight any major threats in his career. I know the groupies are gonna say somebody like saying, well, if Leo Santa Cruz is the biggest name on your resume, you got a problem. Like Santa Cruz was probably dying shot by the time he fought Gervonta Davis. Santa Cruz, who 90% of his own resume was against guys you never heard of, and again, it was a one directional fighter who started at bantamweight and they fought at 130. That's your best win. Pedraza's a solid win, I thought, even though it was a weight-drained Pedraza, and Pedraza was so weight-drained that he'd actually already lost to Edna Cherry and should have already not been champion by the time Gervonta fought him, but they robbed Edna Cherry in that IBF title defense of Jose Pedraza, so that Pedraza remained champion. I remember because I worked that show and commentated that fight. So it's a sneaky good win, but it's sort of below the radar, not that good of a win. He had a weight-drained Pedraza, a Pedraza who went up to lightweight and actually fought better once he didn't have to weight-drain himself, and who had been struggling already at 130 prior to being knocked out by Davis. Like I said, he'd already lost to Cherry and was lucky to keep the title in the Cherry fight at 130. So, Cherry, mind you, a guy that I beat way back in the day. I don't know. It's I beat him easily, like 9 out of 10 rounds, 10 out of 10 rounds, something like that. I don't know. I really don't know what to make of this, man. I sure as hell love to hear the comments. It's gonna generate curiosity for sure. Jake Paul is huge. I mean, this is like, he's going to be almost a foot bigger than Gervonta Davis. This is an exhibition, so there's not going to be an official winner unless there's a stoppage. So things like glove size, ring size still has to be dictated and figured out. I don't know. I don't know what you do with this. I don't know what boxing's coming to. This is what happens when you manufacture a star instead of letting stars organically create themselves. You get guys who don't want to test themselves, who've been spoiled and have been able to, make a lot of free money for no reason. Not for no reason. The thing about Gervonta Davis is he is physically talented. I just don't think mentally he was ever that strong of a fighter. And so to not match him with guys who can physically match him skill for skill and talent for talent, you never get to test his mentality, And the Lamont Roach fight, surprisingly, because Lamont wasn't supposed to be that on that level by the standards of the pre-fight predictions, Lamont took him to that place, and you saw that Gervonta Davis, the questions about Gervonta Davis' mentality and mindset kind of were founded. He started breaking in the fight, taking voluntary knees and getting away with it, and so on and so forth, and that was sort of the knock on Davis. And then you start to realize, in that fight, I think you realize why he's been staying away from the best challenges, the toughest challenges in these fights. Been real, if you look at his resume, I mean, it's a rather weak resume for a guy that's been turned into a star. So the fact that, I don't know if this guy being a star in this generation is lack of intelligence on the part of boxing fans or modern day boxing fans, the young generation, or that's it. This is just the way it is. In the age of entertainment and in the age of technology, you can manufacture a star from anything because the technology creates constant highlight reels. You can, give guys dates against, you can choose to give guys dates against low-level opponents. I mean, think about the resume of Gervonta Davis. A lot of talented 130, 135 pounders on the same resume would have beat the same guys and been undefeated against the same guys. Some of them probably even more impressively. But, there is that dynamic power that Gervonta holds, and that may be something that, maybe is an equalizer as far as the promotability. Sure, knockouts always sell. But it's just, I don't know, man. It's a big question mark for me. The funny thing is, there's going to be a lot of people watching this fight. Jake always generates a lot of fans. I mean, his own fans. They're not boxing fans. I don't think they ever watch boxing aside from Jake. And then Gervonta does have an at this point an inner fan base himself. He's been promoted so much that yeah, of course, how does your fan base not grow when you've been promoted constantly and marketed constantly, so that you create this fan base. So the having it in the huge stadium in Georgia makes sense. I'm not knocking that part of it. I'm just knocking the part of it that is, at what point does boxing stop getting in its own way? With Jake, it's funny too, because Jake is the only guy who can. A couple months ago, we were talking about Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua. So literally, like from flyweight to heavyweight, anybody is in the sweepstakes for a Jake Paul opponent. It's imagine being able to call out or being able to fight anybody in any weight class, and people will tune in to watch. I mean, I was talking about the low intelligence level of boxing fans, but takes a super low level of intelligence of a fan to fall for that one. And again, I guess that's Jake's brilliance and his promotability, great PR team, and so on and so forth. I will, double down on the fact that I think Jake's been an excellent promoter. I think he's going to be good for the sport in the future when he stops fighting. I think he's sort of plateaued as a boxer. I've noticed in the last couple of fights, I think he's actually regressed. So I'm not sure where you go from there. But he's so much bigger than Gervonta Davis that this does draw up question marks. What happens if he lands on Gervonta? Even if you make it big gloves in a exhibition, if it's bigger gloves, he could still hurt Gervonta. Could Gervonta just move around the ring and play it safe and just steal the bag? I mean, will Gervonta try? Because if Gervonta's so small, I think Gervonta hits hard enough that maybe he'll make Jake feel the shots. But if the gloves are too big, that means they're big for Gervonta Davis as well. So does that mean Jake takes a better punch now and can physically try to maul Gervonta Davis even more because there's less to worry about if the gloves are too big? So, I think it's a catch-22 here for Gervonta Davis, because if the gloves are small, he can be hurt, but he's maybe slick enough to avoid getting hit clean and maybe able to land some big punches on Davis, on Jake Paul that could drop him. But then again, he puts himself at risk. But if you make the gloves too big, they protect Gervonta Davis from this big, massive guy. But then he's not able to put as many damaging punches on Jake as well. And that means Jake can more freely attack and use that big physicality. So, yeah, from the fighting perspective, I think as the fight gets close, there'll be more to talk about in that regard. I'm just really bugged out because I thought we were going to get the Lamont Roach rematch. Lamont Roach, mind you, again, was not supposed to be competitive. That's the reason Gervonta Davis even fought him in the first place. Although if Team Davis knew that Lamont Roach was going to be that much of a threat, they wouldn't have fought him in the first place. If you look at the career arc of Gervonta Davis, he takes on nobody who's going to be that much of a threat. He's sort of been able to slide and surf around the biggest threats that were around, and he's been in a generation where there's been a lot of threats in his weight classes. And it ain't like he came around in a generation where it was a dead weight class. He came around in generations where 130, 135 were chock full of very, very difficult opponents. And calling out Lomachenko at 36 when you were in the same weight class as Lomachenko since he was at 130 doesn't count, guys. I'm sorry. That was, it's not like Davis was too young or anything like that. Davis is 30 years old. He could have fought Lomachenko when he was 20, when Davis was 25. It would have been his prime. It would have been a massive fight. He didn't even utter his name until Lomachenko was 36 and on the way out. So, again, that's the good scheming. It'll fool the low-level intelligence fan base, but it won't fool the people who know what they're watching. Either way, like I said, disappointing. There's so many great fights that can be made. This is a legitimate bona fide world champion in Gervonta Davis, so that you want to see more. But you're gonna get the Jake Paul fight, and yeah, there is interesting things about it. But is this where boxing is gonna be headed, guys? I mean, what do you think at home? I know there's the Davis Brigade and even the Jake Paul Brigade that are going to be big fans of the fight because they don't complain about anything, these kind of guys. We live in a generation where there's a little bit of groupie syndrome where no matter what the person these people follow, they are up for it and people are supportive of it no matter what. And that shouldn't really be the case. You should really, form your own opinion, even if you like the person, if they're doing something that you don't like, I hope that people smarten up. Because if they don't smarten up, they're going to continue to destroy this great sport that has been around for a while and has really built to a crescendo at this point. I'm Paulie Malignaggi, guys. Let me know in the comments what you think, and let me know what your thoughts on Gervonta Davis doing this, on this fight in general, even on Jake Paul. I'm Paulie Malignaggi. This is Paulie TV.